Born in 1933, as a child, what were your memories of World War II?
As far as World War II, I was living in Mexico City with my parents at that time when Pearl Harbor was bombed. And so we heard a lot about the war from that area. And then my dad joined the armed forces in the Army, and we moved around, seemed like for the rest of my schooling years. We lived in Seattle, where they were building the super fortresses, that one or two or three of which finally dropped the atomic bomb on Japan. But they did also a lot of bombing before that. They killed many more Japanese in the firebombing of Tokyo, and that was, in a sense, even more devastating than the atomic bomb. But we lived on the West Coast, and of course, you're hearing now about things being washed up because of the tsunami that hit Japan, just now getting to our shores. And the Japanese did make some balloons that would come over with the wind, and they had bombs attached to them, which a few people were hurt, maybe one or two killed, because they found these balloons with the bombs attached, and they would explode and they'd be hurt or killed. But that was very rare. It wasn't an effective weapon as a deterrent. And I do remember when the war was over, I was living in Olympia, Washington, and all of that year I was very glad the war was over. And during that time I was delivering newspapers, so I knew quite a bit about what was going on.
Was it a scary time for you and your family throughout World War II?
No, it really wasn't scary, because there was an ocean between us and the Japanese and all the small islands in the Solomons, which are beyond Japan. So it really wasn't scary, and back then we didn't have planes that could fly all the way across the ocean without refueling.
What were your thoughts on Japanese people?
Well, we tended to have bad thoughts about them, but the minister in my church, Baptist church in Seattle, reacted to the dropping of the atomic bomb on the Japanese cities. He was very much against that because it killed so many people who, after all, were human beings. And so he, with the Council of Churches and other organizations, detested that and made it known.
After the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, was there Japanese discrimination?
Yes, living there in Seattle, in the Pacific Northwest, there were a lot of Japanese lived there, and actually my family moved into an apartment building where the Japanese had been taken out and taken to internment camps, and of course that gave us a place to live. And then later on, toward the end of the war, I had a friend, a classmate, whose dad was Japanese, and his dad had gone to the internment camp, so he was very glad, of course, when the war was winding down also, because his dad came home.
What year did you go to Germany, and what are your memories of what the country was like after the war?
Well, I went to Germany right after World War II was over, and went in 1946, a year after it was over. And I remember being on the train after getting off the boat and going through some of the cities in Germany, which were just complete rubble. It was just, you could see walls and chimneys here and there where the houses had been. They completely bombed out. But most of the German cities were not like that. And so the people, the Germans, did accept us fairly well, and there was at that time no retribution against the Americans, because we treated them much nicer than the Russians did.
What did you guys think about Germans?
Well, we did not hate the Germans. They were very much like us, and many of them spoke English, and they taught in our schools. And I learned to speak German at that time fairly well, and my sister, who was a little bit older, went to a German school with her German friends.
Mm-hmm.
So we were all quite friendly as kids, and the adults were also. Would go to concerts, go down river on a cruise for the evening, and it was quite nice.
When you were there, you were treated pretty well by all the Germans.
Yes, yeah, we would ride the streetcars, and we were not prohibited going anywhere. And of course, all the dependents, there were thousands of dependents in all the cities that occupied the United States. But there was, I cannot remember a single incident of anything bad happening.
Can you describe the finding of the warhead that said you can kiss Hitler with this?
Yeah, that was actually on a motor, the nameplate on the motor of a B-17 Flying Fortress that had been brought to the town where I live, because that's where the German aircraft factory was located. What they would have done with it, I don't know. But anyway, I pried off this little nameplate on the motor that gave specifications, and then on the back of it was, "You can kiss Hitler with this one," was written down or printed on there.
After you got to Germany, was life pretty much normal?
Yes, it was. The food was abundant. Clothing for the German people was a little bit hard for them to get. And my mom knew some German friends, and they made some clothing for my sister and me out of army blankets.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, you'd have to order clothing in the first part of the occupation. You have to order it from places like Montgomery Ward's or Cedar Roebuck, which took about a month to get there from the States.
What was life like compared to now in the 1940s?
Well, at that time, things didn't cost as much. And since then, inflation, if you want to look at it that way, has skyrocketed. So things cost a lot more now. There are more things to buy. And things like television sets and cell phones were not available at that time. There weren't any.
For your time at the Naval Academy, what was it like?
It was very regimented. You had to march everywhere. You marched to class, you marched to meal, you marched to church. You didn't go anywhere much at all, except maybe when you had some free time on the weekends. But other than that, you marched everywhere with your classmates.
During the 1960s, there were several big events like Vietnam, space exploration, and the assassination of Kennedy and Martin Luther King. What did you think about Vietnam?
I was, when I resigned from the Naval Academy, I think either that war was going on or Korea. Right at the moment, can't remember which one it was, but anyway, I did get a deferment to go back to college, so I was glad I didn't have to go to Vietnam. And it was not a good war. It was fought in the jungles pretty much. A lot of people died on both sides. It was a dirty war, as all are. As far as exploration of space, I was a flight surgeon. And even where I was stationed at the Air Crew Equipment Laboratory, we even had some of the astronauts coming in there to train because of their spacesuits.
Mm-hmm.
And an accident happened there in the pressure chamber because it was 100% oxygen. And there were about 5 people in this chamber at altitude, 100% oxygen, and one of the electrical outlets started sparking. And my friend stuck a towel in there, and of course that led to a severe fire, and he was injured quite badly, but he did get all the people out of there.
You were alive for the assassinations of Kennedy and Martin Luther King. Where were you?
When they Kennedy, I was at the University of Pennsylvania studying to be a dermatologist. And as far as Martin Luther King, I was already a dermatologist and practicing in the Navy downtown Washington, D.C. on Constitution Avenue. And that was about mid-afternoon that the news started spreading around about the assassination. And or the next
of
day
Kennedy or
of Martin Luther King. And there were reports that the people had started burning the department stores further downtown, so that was a little bit scary.
Mhm.
Also, when I was a flight surgeon in the same area where the astronauts were getting their training in the pressure chambers and their spacesuits, we were working with sled acceleration and ejection seats. And I was a subject on several of those occasions, and with the ejection seat, you would pull the face curtain and the seat would be shot up by a cannon shell. And one of those times, the onset of the acceleration was so rapid that I got a fracture, a compression fracture in my upper spine.
Mhm.
And I was, not for about 10 minutes was I able to work my hand to mash the thing like on an emergency brake, to mash the button to let the seat go back down. But this just demonstrated that pilots who had ejected from their aircraft and had the same problem wouldn't have been able to raise their arms to be able to let the parachute go. And some of the time they were just dragged through the water by the wind and drowned. So I was motivated to do that sort of work, but then I did eventually go into dermatology. My motivation way back there somewhere was that when I was in the 5th grade, I helped get a fishing hook out of a guy's eye. We'd been playing around and swinging the line with a fishing hook on it, and he caught him in the eyelid, and fortunately it didn't hurt his eye, but I was able to extract it without any damage.